The date is May 10th, 1972. The location is the airspace above the Hai Duong province, North Vietnam. The sky is a washed-out grey, thick with humidity and the lingering haze of anti-aircraft artillery fire. Inside the cockpit of a silver MiG-17 fighter, a pilot of the Vietnam People's Air Force is sweating. The cockpit is cramped, smelling of ozone and hydraulic fluid. He is hunting. His ground control intercept officer has vectored him toward a flight of American aircraft, moving slowly toward the Than Hoa Bridge. On the radar scope, the blips are sluggish. They are not moving at the supersonic speeds of the F-4 Phantom fighters. They are not trailing the massive soot clouds of the B-52 bombers. To the North Vietnamese pilot, this profile suggests only one thing: heavy attack aircraft, bomb trucks, laden with ordnance, slow and vulnerable. In the rigid hierarchy of aerial warfare, these aircraft are prey. The MiG-17 fighter, despite its age, is a predator designed for exactly this moment. It is a subsonic dogfighter, built to turn tight and shred sluggish bombers with its heavy cannons. The pilot spots the American formation through the breaks in the clouds. They are ugly machines. They have a gaping, cavernous air intake under the nose, a high wing, and a stubby, truncated fuselage. They look nothing like the sleek, shark-like phantoms that usually prowl these skies. They look like flying barrels. The Vietnamese pilot feels a surge of confidence. This is a simple equation. He has the speed, he has the altitude, and he has the maneuverability. He rolls his MiG-17 fighter into a dive, bringing the nose up to lead the trailing American jet. He expects the standard American reaction. Usually, when attacked, heavy strike aircraft do one of two things. They jettison their bombs instantly to gain speed and run for the coast, or they panic and break formation, making them easy pickings for the wingmen. But as the MiG pilot closes the distance, the impossible happens. The American jet does not drop its bombs. It does not ignite an afterburner to flee, because it does not have one. Instead, the flying barrel banks hard. It pulls into the turn. The North Vietnamese pilot is confused, but he follows. He is flying one of the most agile turning fighters ever built by the Soviet Union. He assumes the American pilot is making a fatal error, trying to turn with a MiG. He pulls back on the stick, the G-forces crushing him into his seat, waiting for the American jet to bleed off its energy and fall out of the sky. But the American jet does not fall. It holds the turn. It sustains the energy. The distance between them does not close. The ugly, subsonic aircraft is matching the turn radius of the MiG-17 fighter. The prey has suddenly decided to become a combatant. The Vietnamese pilot pushes his throttle to the firewall. The Klimov engine behind him screams. He cuts the angle, trying to bring his cannons to bear, but the American jet reverses its turn with a fluidity that defies its appearance. It is dancing. How is a fully loaded strike aircraft out-turning a dedicated interceptor? Panic replaces confidence. The hunter realizes he has lost the initiative. The American jet is now sliding behind him. The geometry of the fight has inverted. The pilot breaks off, diving toward the cloud deck, confused and shaken, leaving the bomb truck to continue its mission. He returns to base with a terrifying report. The Americans have a bomber that fights like a fighter. This is the story of an anomaly. A machine that looked incorrect, sounded incorrect, and flew in a way that baffled the pilot sent to destroy it. Before we unravel the mystery of the A-7 Corsair II and the Soviet confusion that surrounded it, make sure to subscribe to Cold War Impact. We document the hidden history of the great power struggle, one declassified file at a time. The confusion on the ground at the Kep Air Base is palpable. The debriefing room is filled with cigarette smoke and the sharp chatter of pilots and intelligence officers. The pilot from the engagement stands before a chalkboard, sketching the silhouette of the aircraft he encountered. It is short, it is squat, it is subsonic. The Soviet military advisors present in the room are listening intently. They know the American infantry well. They know the F-105 Thunderchief, a fast, heavy striker that cannot turn. They know the F-4 Phantom, a missile carrier that relies on speed and radar. They know the F-8 Crusader, the last of the gunfighters. But this description does not match. The pilot insists that the aircraft retained its energy in a high G turn without using an afterburner. This violates the doctrine of American air power, which has always prioritized speed and thrust over agility. The intelligence officers pull up the recognition manuals. They identify the aircraft as the Vought A-7 Corsair II. To the US Navy, it is a replacement for the A-4 Skyhawk. To the pilots who fly it, it is affectionately or derisively known as the slough-short, little, ugly fucker. On paper, the A-7 Corsair II should not be a threat to a MiG-21 fighter or a MiG-17 fighter in air-to-air combat. It is subsonic, maxing out around 600 knots. It carries thousands of pounds of iron bombs. It has no internal radar for guiding air-to-air missiles. Yet reports are filtering in from across the theatre. This was not an isolated incident. North Vietnamese surface-to-air missile crews are reporting that these aircraft stay over the target area for impossibly long durations. When fired upon, they maneuver with a snappiness that throws off the guidance logic of the SA-2 guideline missiles. The Soviet advisors send a cable back to Moscow. The message is urgent but perplexing. The Americans have introduced a variable that does not fit the standard model of engagement. They are not just facing a new bomber, they are facing a shift in aerodynamic philosophy. The mystery deepens when the wreckage of a downed A-7 aircraft is finally located in the jungle. It is not a clean crash. The airframe is mangled, but the intelligence teams manage to recover parts of the engine and the cockpit avionics. What they find inside the cockpit does not look like the crude dials and gauges of the F-4 Phantom. It looks like something from the future. There is a transparent pane of glass positioned at eye level above the instrument panel, a head-up display, or HUD. The Soviet engineers examine the shattered components. They realize that this simple attack jet possesses a navigational and weapons delivery computer more advanced than anything currently flying in the Soviet Air Force. The pilots of the Vietnam People's Air Force are asking a critical question. If this aircraft is so slow, why is it so hard to kill? And more terrifyingly, how is it placing unguided bombs with such mathematical precision, regardless of the weather, regardless of the terrain? The perception of the A-7 Corsair II as a clumsy mud mover is a fatal deception. The enemy is beginning to realize that the Americans have brought a sniper rifle to a knife fight, disguised as a blunt instrument. But they do not yet understand the engine technology that allows it to defy the laws of energy management. The investigation into the slough has just begun, and the answers will challenge everything the Soviets believe about jet propulsion. The mystery of the A-7 Corsair II moves from the terrified cockpit of a fighter jet to the claustrophobic interior of a surface-to-air missile command van. It is late 1972. The location is the Iron Triangle, a heavily defended sector northwest of Saigon. For the North Vietnamese missile crews, the war is a mathematical game of fuel and time. They know the operational limits of American aircraft better than the American public does. They know that an F-4 Phantom, fully loaded with ordnance and using afterburners to maneuver, has a very short tether. It strikes, it drops, and it must turn back to the tankers over Thailand or the Gulf of Tonkin. The sky is usually dangerous for only fleeting moments. But this new aircraft, the one the pilots are calling the Stubby Fighter, is breaking the rhythm of the war. Inside the SA-2 guideline control van, the radar operators are watching a blip on the P-12 radar scope. It is tracing a lazy figure-8 pattern over a known supply route. The operator waits. He expects the American jet to dive, release bombs, and leave. 10 minutes pass. The blip remains. 20 minutes pass. The blip is still there. 30 minutes. The commander of the missile battery is becoming agitated. This behavior is unnatural. In the era of turbojet engines, fuel is liquid gold. To loiter over a target area for half an hour with a full combat load is aerodynamically expensive. The commander suspects a trap. Is there an aerial refueling tanker nearby? He checks the wider surveillance grid. No. The nearest KC-135 Stratotanker is hundreds of miles away. This single American jet is operating in isolation, hanging in the sky like a vulture. This endurance creates a terrifying tactical problem for the North Vietnamese. As long as that aircraft is overhead, the supply trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail cannot move. The anti-aircraft gunners cannot relax. The radar crews cannot turn on their fan-song guidance radars because they fear the anti-radiation missiles that might be hanging under the wings of the loitering jet. The A-7 Corsair II is weaponizing time. On the ground, the acoustic signature of this aircraft is adding to the confusion. The listening posts scattered throughout the jungle are trained to identify aircraft by the sound of their engines. The F-105 Thunderchief creates a distinctive, earth-shaking crackle. The F-4 Phantom roars with a deep, brute-force thrum that vibrates the chest. But the reports coming in about this new aircraft describe a different sound. It is a lower-pitched whine, a buzzing hum that precedes the explosion. It lacks the violent, tearing noise of the raw turbojets. And visually, there is another anomaly. There is no smoke. The F-4 Phantom is notorious for the thick trails of black soot its J-79 engines leave behind, making it visible from 20 miles away. This new jet is smokeless. It arrives silently, strikes, and then instead of fleeing, it simply climbs back up to 10,000 feet and waits. Soviet technical advisors are now piecing together the data from these extended loiter times. They are looking at the specific fuel consumption rates. The numbers are stark. This aircraft is burning 30 to 40% less fuel than a comparable fighter bomber. This points to a propulsion breakthrough that the Soviet Union has struggled to master for its frontline tactical jets, the high bypass turbofan. While the Soviets have used turbofans on large transport aircraft, fitting a high bypass engine into a compact carrier-based combat jet is an engineering marvel. It changes the thermal signature of the war. The engine is cooler, it is quieter, and it is incredibly efficient. The slough is not relying on brute speed, it is relying on bypass air. It is essentially a flying fuel tank wrapped around a high-efficiency engine. But the mystery of the engine is secondary to the mystery of the devastation. The survivability of the A-7 Corsair II is perplexing, but its lethality is what truly frightens the enemy commanders. In the past, when American jets dive-bombed a bridge or a rail yard, they did so at steep angles, releasing bombs at specific altitudes to ensure accuracy. If the pilot released a fraction of a second too late, the bomb missed. If the wind was strong, the bomb missed. It was an art form, prone to human error. The reports from the target zones involving the A-7 aircraft are different. The craters are grouped with terrifying tightness. And stranger still, the aircraft are not always diving. Sometimes they are releasing ordnance from level flight, or from complex tossing maneuvers that should make accuracy impossible. One recovered report from a North Vietnamese logistics officer describes a night attack. The weather was poor, with low cloud cover and rain conditions that usually ground American air power or render it ineffective. The officer felt safe moving his convoy. Suddenly, the convoy was obliterated. There were no flares dropped to illuminate the target. There was no visual confirmation. The bombs simply fell out of the dark, rainy sky and struck the trucks directly. How does a pilot in a single-seat aircraft, flying at night in the rain, find a moving truck and hit it without seeing it? The Soviet advisors suspect the Americans are using a new type of radar, but the nose of the A-7 is too small to house the massive navigation radars used by strategic bombers like the B-52. There is no space for a bombardier or a navigator in the cockpit. It is just one man. The enemy intelligence services are forced to consider a disturbing possibility. The Americans have automated the kill chain. The pilot is no longer just flying. He is managing a system that flies itself. As the weeks drag on, the psychological impact of the A-7 Corsair II grows. It is the plane that never goes home. It is the plane that turns like a fighter. It is the plane that sees in the dark. The North Vietnamese pilots are wary of engaging it, and the ground crews are terrified of its silence. But the true shock is yet to come. The Soviet engineers are about to discover that the impossible accuracy of the A-7 is not just due to a good radar. It is due to a digital revolution that is quietly taking place inside the nose cone of this ugly little jet. A revolution that will make the Soviet Union's entire air defense doctrine obsolete overnight. The investigation shifts from the engine to the mind of the machine. The investigation shifts from the humid jungles of Vietnam to a sterile, windowless room in Moscow. It is late 1973. Soviet engineers at the Gromov Flight Research Institute are staring at a table covered in debris. They have analyzed the engines. They understand the aerodynamics. But they are now looking at something that defies the logic of Soviet aviation design: the avionics bay of the A-7 Corsair II. In a standard Soviet fighter like the MiG-21 aircraft, the cockpit is a clutter of analog gauges. To navigate, the pilot relies on ground control vectors, radio beacons, and a physical paper map strapped to his knee pad. If he wants to drop a bomb, he uses a fixed optical sight, essentially a piece of glass with a crosshair drawn on it. He has to dive at a specific angle and speed, manually calculating the drop. It is a workload that exhausts the human brain. But the components on the table in Moscow tell a different story. The engineers are examining a black box labeled ASN-91. It is not a radio, it is not a radar, it is a central tactical computer. For the Soviet analysts, This is the twist that changes the complexion of the Cold War. Up until this moment, computers were room-sized behemoths used for strategic calculations or ballistic missile trajectories. The idea of shrinking a digital computer and placing it inside a tactical attack jet subject to high G-forces, vibration and temperature shifts is technically audacious. But the true shock comes when they power up a recovered display unit. It is the PMDS, the projected map display system. To the modern eye, a moving map on a screen is commonplace. In the early 1970s, it is witchcraft. The Soviet engineers watch in disbelief as the display illuminates. It does not show a blip on a green radar sweep. It shows a full-color topographical map. And, unlike a static image, this map moves. They realize the terrifying implication. The map is linked to the navigation computer. As the aircraft turns, the map rotates. As the aircraft speeds up, the map scrolls. The pilot of the A7 Corsair II does not need to look out the window to know where he is. He does not need to unfold a paper map while dodging anti-aircraft fire. He has a god's eye view of the battlefield, constantly updated in real time. This explains the reports from the North Vietnamese interceptors. The American pilots are never lost. They fly with a confidence that suggests they know the terrain better than the defenders do. But the map is just the beginning. The investigation reveals that this computer is doing something far more dangerous than just navigation. It is talking to the engine, the radar, and the altimeter simultaneously. It is solving the ballistic problem. In traditional bombing, the pilot is the computer. He must estimate the wind drift. He must estimate the target's speed. He must hold the stick steady. The engineers discover that the A7 Corsair II has removed the pilot from this equation. The computer measures the wind. It measures the air density. It measures the speed of the jet. It calculates the exact trajectory of the bomb before it even leaves the wing. This leads to the discovery of the death dot. Intelligence reports describe a symbology on the pilot's head-up display called the CCIP, Continuously Computed Impact Point. It is a simple dot of light projected onto the glass. The computer tells the pilot, wherever this dot is, that is where the bomb will hit. This is the thrill and the horror for the enemy analysis team. The A7 pilot does not need to fly in a straight, predictable line to bomb a target. He can jink, weave, and turn to avoid surface-to-air missiles. As long as he can put that floating dot on the target for a split second and press the button, the computer handles the release. The slough has decoupled survivability from accuracy. In every other aircraft in history, to be accurate, you had to be vulnerable. You had to fly straight. The A7 breaks this rule. It can fly erratically like a fighter and still bomb with the precision of a sniper. A chilling report from a Soviet observer in the field confirms this capability. He witnessed a flight of A7s attacking the Than Hoa Bridge, a target that had withstood hundreds of attacks by F-105s and F-4s. The A7s did not dive in a straight line. They approached from different altitudes. One banked hard, inverted, and pulled through a loop, releasing its ordnance at the top of the maneuver in a toss-bombing profile. The bombs were unguided, iron bombs, dumb weapons, but they landed with such precision that they struck the individual support pilings of the bridge. The observer noted that the aircraft were exposed to heavy anti-aircraft fire for less than 10 seconds. They appeared, struck, and vanished. The Soviet engineers in Moscow are left with a sinking realization. The Americans have successfully integrated a digital brain into a combat aircraft. They have created a system where a single pilot in a single-engine jet can do the work of a World War II bomber crew, but with 10 times the accuracy and none of the vulnerability. The ugly exterior of the Corsair was a mask. Underneath the skin, it was the first true digital jet of the modern era. The Soviets are now scrambling to understand how IBM and Vought managed to harden these delicate electronics for combat. They know that if they cannot replicate this technology, their numerical superiority in tanks and troops is meaningless, because if the Americans can put a dumb bomb through a window from 3 miles away while turning, no army on Earth is safe. But there is one final piece of the puzzle that the Soviets have missed. It is the reason why the A7 was not just a bomber, but a survivor. It lies in the redundancy of the systems, a design philosophy so paranoid and robust that it would allow the aircraft to fly even when shattered. The final shock for the North Vietnamese and their Soviet advisors does not come from a radar screen or a black box. It comes from the sky above the Gulf of Tonkin, trailing smoke and defying physics. It is late in the war. An A-7 Corsair II has just completed a run over a heavily defended rail yard near Hanoi. As the pilot pulls off the target, the sky erupts. A 37mm anti-aircraft shell slams into the starboard wing. The explosion is catastrophic. It shears off a large section of the wingtip, severs the primary hydraulic lines, and sends shrapnel tearing through the fuselage. From the ground, the North Vietnamese gunners cheer. They have seen this hundreds of times. When an aircraft takes a direct hit of that magnitude, the result is inevitable. The hydraulic fluid, the lifeblood of a jet, will drain out in seconds. The flight controls will freeze. The aircraft will roll uncontrollably into the jungle. They wait for the ejection seat rocket motor to fire. They wait for the parachute. But the parachute never appears. The A-7 Corsair II shudders violently. It drops altitude. But then it stabilizes. The wings level out. The dead aircraft turns toward the coast and begins the long flight back to the carrier. To the gunners on the ground, this is a ghost story. To the Soviet engineers analyzing the combat data later, it is a revelation about American design philosophy that is even more disturbing than the digital computer. The secret lies in the anatomy of the machine. The Soviet engineers are accustomed to the brutal efficiency of the MiG-21 fighter. In a MiG, weight is the enemy. Every system is stripped to the bare minimum to achieve Mach 2 speed. Redundancy is a luxury they cannot afford. If the main systems fail, the pilot is expected to eject. The aircraft is expendable, the pilot is replaceable. But the A-7 Corsair II was built with a different philosophy. The pilot is the most expensive asset in the inventory, and the aircraft must bring him home. The investigation into the surviving A-7 airframes reveals a level of redundancy that borders on paranoia. The engineers discover that the Corsair does not have one hydraulic system. It does not even have two. It has three completely independent hydraulic flight control systems. If the primary system is shot away, the secondary takes over. If the engine dies and the pumps stop turning, a small propeller called the ram air turbine drops out of the fuselage into the airstream, generating enough pressure to keep the controls moving. And if all fluid is lost, the aircraft is designed with a manual reversion mode, a system of mechanical linkages that allows the pilot to muscle the heavy jet back to base using sheer physical strength. The slough was built like a flying tank. The pilot sits in a bathtub of boron carbide armor plating capable of stopping armor-piercing bullets. The fuel tanks are self-sealing and filled with inert foam to prevent explosions. The critical flight control lines are routed through opposite sides of the fuselage so that a single hit cannot sever them all. This is the shock that the enemy cannot reconcile. They have spent decades building fast, fragile interceptors designed to shoot down bombers that fly in straight lines. They are now fighting a slow, ugly, digital tank that can absorb punishment that would disintegrate a Soviet fighter, and it fights back with computer-aided precision while bleeding to death. The psychological toll on the North Vietnamese air defenses is immense. They are expending massive amounts of ammunition, firing expensive SA-2 missiles, and scoring hits. Yet the American planes keep flying. The kill probability charts provided by Moscow are proving useless against the Corsair. But the final realization, the one that keeps the Soviet generals awake at night, is not about the metal. It is about the data. In the final days of the analysis, the Soviet intelligence teams realized the true power of the head-up display, HUD, and the central computer. They initially thought these were just aiming tools. They were wrong. They discovered that the HUD is the primary reason for the A-7's impossible survivability. In a traditional cockpit, a pilot under fire is heads down, scanning gauges, checking fuel, checking altitude, checking heading. He is distracted. He is vulnerable. In the A-7, the pilot never looks down. The computer projects his airspeed, his altitude, his heading, and his target solution directly onto the glass in front of his eyes. He can watch the enemy missile launch, maneuver to avoid it, and line up his bomb run simultaneously. The computer manages the complexity. The pilot manages the fight. This is the force multiplier effect. A single A-7 pilot, aided by this digital ecosystem, has the situational awareness of a two-man crew in an F-4 Phantom, but with faster reaction times. The Soviet Union realizes they have lost the technological initiative. They are still building better engines and sharper airframes, but the Americans have begun to build better systems. The A7 Corsair II is the grandmother of the F-117 Nighthawk, which would use the same pilots and avionics logic, and the F-16 Falcon. It is the beginning of the software-defined fighter. The shock was never about a single secret weapon. It was the realization that the era of the hotshot pilot wrestling a stick and rudder was over. The era of the systems manager had begun. The North Vietnamese pilots who first saw the A7 and laughed at its bulbous nose and slow speed learned a hard lesson in the skies over Hai Duong. They learned that in modern warfare, it does not matter how fast you can fly. It matters how well you can process information and how much punishment you can endure. The A7 Corsair II was subsonic, ugly, and unglamorous, but it possessed a digital mind and an armored heart. It was the quiet revolution that paved the way for American air dominance in the 21st century. It proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the sky isn't the shark, it's the machine that refuses to die.